Here on Tales of Home, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The afternoon over Arlington stacked stormlight on top of heat, a silver bruise gathering above the Virginia hills. Flags along the walk snapped and then sagged as the wind shifted, and somewhere behind the amphitheater, a bugle test cut short in a clean tin note. The marble looked sun-baked and slick at once, like rain might arrive in a single hard sheet and glass the plaza. Visitors drifted into quiet without anyone telling them to, hands in pockets, hats off strollers rolling softer on the stone. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole paced his 21 like a metronome that refused to hurry. He wore the blue coat and white gloves as if they belonged to the stone itself. Hat brim level, chin still. M14 held at a measured angle that never wavered even when the breeze knifed across the terrace. Heel clicks struck the same square of marble, each turn a private promise made public. He counted without counting. The rifle's balance tugged the same way every stride. The crease in his trousers held like a rule. Beyond the rope line, a laminated sign caught the light. Quiet respect remain behind the barrier. The rope wasn't heavy, just a black arc that marked where memory began and everything else stopped. People took it in the way they take in weather real non-negotiable. A teacher shepherded a cluster of 8th graders wearing matching field trip lanyards. She raised a finger to her lips, and the kids' hush softened like a volume knob turning down. One boy lifted his phone, thought better of it when he noticed his reflection in the polished stone, and tucked the phone away. Maya Delgado stood 3 paces back from the line, earbuds looped around her collarbone. She was smaller than the gear bag on her shoulder, all will and attention. She cupped a hand around a pocket recorder and watched the levels dance, listened for the texture of the place flag against halyard shoe tread, squeak, breath held too long. She whispered a date into the mic, July 4th week late, so she wouldn't forget it in the edit. Her lenses were clean, her battery near full, but she kept the camera down. You didn't point a lens first here. You earned it. On a bench in the shade of a pin oak, Walt Garner leaned on a cane scarred by a lifetime of floors. Navy ball cap faded brim bent just right. The cane's ferrule made a soft tick when he set it down and lifted it again, a rhythm that fell under Cole's footfalls like bass under a drum. Walt watched without squinting eyes that still remembered silhouettes on a steel-gray sea. When the wind stiffened and buckled a nearby flag, he reached up and tugged the brim of his hat as if to steady it. The sky had that green cast storms get when they mean it. Banners for the Independence Week ceremony hung from the amphitheater colonnade, fresh canvas, tight grommets. A grounds crewman tested a portable speaker with a short lick of recorded taps, no longer than a breath. Conversations faded mid-syllable and did not return. A father crouched to his daughter's height and said something she kept to herself. She straightened the little paper flag she held and gripped it closer to her chest. Vince Slug Moreno arrived the way a problem arrives, sideways at first, then undeniable. He shouldered through a knot of tourists with a muttered apology that didn't slow his feet. Big man, big jaw, a neck the size of someone else's thigh. Sweat darkened the collar of his charcoal t-shirt, and his hands looked worked-over scars tracked across the knuckles, old stories written in pale lines. He walked like he expected things to give. They mostly did. Moreno stopped near the rope, not touching it, his breath a little quick from the climb. He studied Cole the way a man studies a lock he thinks he can pick. There was a whisper of rye on his exhale, and the brittle hum of someone trying to swallow a day that wouldn't go down. A tourist brushed past him and said sorry. Moreno didn't look away from the guard. He flexed his right hand as if checking that it still belonged to him. Cole didn't glance over. He didn't waste a single motion on the crowd. The effect was not ignorance, but focus so pure it created its own gravity. 21 down. Halt. Present. Turn. The movement carried no extra. Shoulders set, weight pitched through the hips, boots framed square, no wobble. A drop of sweat cooled on his neck and vanished when the wind lifted again. He breathed in on the step out on the turn, and the pattern steadied him like a rail. Maya caught Moreno in the edge of her frame and tilted the camera off him, letting the man be a background shape instead of a subject. She pressed the record button on audio only and marked another quiet note. Crowd mixed families, vets, storms building. A teacher's whistle chirped in a pocket somewhere and stopped fast. 2 teenagers stood heel to heel and mimicked the pivot for 3 seconds before their own reflection in the marble made them stand still again. Walt watched the big man by the rope line, watched his shoulders ride up, watched the shake in his jaw settle, and then start again. The cane tapped once, twice. He shifted his weight and let the handle rest in the hook of his elbow. When the wind gusted, he planted his shoes wider and breathed. The habit of keeping your center low didn't leave you. The air changed as the first promise of rain hit the plaza, only 3 drops fat and cold spaced like warnings. A banner cracked on its tether. The trees along the ridge darkened as if someone turned the dimmer down. Cole reached his turn at the edge of the mat and drew the rifle across his chest, stock and sling sitting in a geometry that had been drilled into muscle so long it might as well be bone. He saw the drop on the barrel and registered it with the same attention he gave to his next step and nothing more. Moreno rolled his shoulders forward and planted his hands on his hips. Elbows flared the classic posture of someone daring something to happen. His eyes went from Cole to the sign and back. A little boy tugged his mother's sleeve and pointed. She shook her head gentle, and they took a half step back as if they had crossed some invisible threshold simply by watching too hard. Maya felt the energy shift. The plaza was never truly silent. Air has noise, and so do nerves. But now the noise thinned, and the space rang in the way empty churches ring. She thumbed the gain down a notch to keep the peaks from clipping if something sharp cut the quiet. She set her feet shoulder-width because the stone could go slick in a heartbeat. She noted without judgment how many hands in the crowd found the phones in their pockets and how many didn't. A grounds crew cart hummed past in low-gear brake lights winking. The driver looked toward the rope as if measuring the distance like a carpenter measures a run. He kept going. The clouds stacked higher, bruise on bruise. Someone coughed and then swallowed the second cough. A stroller wheel clicked once against a joint in the stone and then rolled smooth again. Cole's heel met marble. The click landed clean, the kind of sound you can measure time against. He turned his head the exact degree protocol demanded, no more, no less, and set his eyes past the crowd to a point the public couldn't see. The rifle lay in his hands like a line drawn on a map. He felt his heartbeat where it belonged and nowhere else. The storm could do what storms do. The guard would do what guards do. Moreno's jaw twitched. He shifted his stance an inch closer to the rope. That was as far as anything went for now. The plaza breathed. The flag snapped. The bugle stayed quiet. Cole took the next step. The marble held. The storm waited. The line held 2 black rope brass stanchions, simple and exact. And for the moment, that was enough. Wind shouldered through the colonnade and kicked the rope line into a shallow sway. The clouds stacked higher, dark on dark, and the first low grumble rolled off the river like a truck changing gears somewhere out of sight. The plaza held its breath and kept moving anyway. Footfalls softened, strollers eased to the edges. A few hats came off without being told. Vince Slug Moreno edged closer until the toes of his boots lined up with the shadow of the rope. He leaned in as if the air itself were a dare. When the rope swung back, it brushed the stitching on his shirt and hopped once against the brass stanchion. He smiled like he'd made something happen. "Hey, statue," he said, not quite loud, not quite quiet. "You hear me, or you just got batteries in there?" Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole finished his turn and set the rifle across his chest without a tick out of place. He didn't look at the voice. His eyes fixed just beyond the crowd the way you fix on horizon to keep your balance. The cadence held. Maya Delgado shifted a foot to square herself with the stone joints beneath her. The recorder in her hand caught the rope's soft creak, the metal hiss of a distant cart, the thin breath of a child close by. She let the camera hang and let the audio run. A note under her breath for the file. Crowd density up, wind gusting, and then nothing else. She watched the man by the line, watched his shoulders climb and stall the micro-tells you learn from hours of airports and fairs and waiting rooms. On the bench, Walt Garner set the heel of his cane, then changed his mind and lifted it again. The ferrule kissed stone and lifted, kissed stone and lifted. He watched the big man's hands, not his face. Hands say more. Moreno rolled his neck until it popped and grinned at nobody. All that polish, he said to the space between him and the guard. You boys practice walking, or is that natural? A father bent to his son and whispered, We whisper here. The boy nodded like he'd known all along and just needed reminding. Cole's heel hit the same square of marble and clicked. He turned his head the regulation degrees and spoke in a voice that traveled without shouting. Sir, please remain behind the barrier. Moreno looked down at the rope like he'd never seen one before. He lifted a finger and plucked it the way you pluck a guitar string. It hummed against the brass and settled. He took half a step back and then gave the space right back to his shoulders. Relax, he said, smile thin. I'm just looking. The rope lifted with the gust, brushed his shirt again, dropped back into its shallow loop. He let it tap him once, twice, as if that made it his. His eyes stayed on Cole's hands. He watched the way the white gloves held the rifle like a level. Two teenagers by the steps drifted toward each other, shoulder to shoulder, and the taller one raised his phone. The lens had a way of making everything into a show. The shorter one nudged his elbow down. Dude, he breathed. Not here. Maya adjusted her gain and kept her frame wide. Her thumb hovered over the camera switch, then settled back to audio. She marked a chapter, subject at line, tone baiting. A grounds crewman halfway down the terrace slowed his cart without touching the brake. He looked at the rope, then at Cole, then at the sky. He rolled on. Moreno damped his smile and spoke up. You're gonna keep marching Tin Man while a guy talks to you. That how this works? He spread his hands as if to show he had nothing in them but impatience. Cole reached his halt, drew the rifle across with the same economy as the 100 halts before it, and set his voice again. Sir, maintain distance, respect the line. Respect, Moreno mouthed, as if tasting a word he didn't order. Yeah, I'm real big on that. He bent at the waist, as if to read the sign more carefully. Quiet respect, remain behind the barrier, and then straightened so fast the rope bounced. He pivoted, put his back to the crowd, then wheeled again to face the guard like a fighter does to keep his legs hot. His hands couldn't decide where to be thumbs, in pockets, fingers flexed, fists half-made and then unmade. A teacher near Maya lifted her own hand and made the two-finger hush used on school buses. The cluster of kids around her folded into themselves and watched in that flat, open way kids have when they know an adult has shifted from fun to pay attention. Walt's jaw set a little. He pulled the cap bill once, not to adjust it, but to remind his hands they had something else to do. Moreno took one slow step forward, foot, heel, toe across the seam of stone, and the shadow of his boot crossed a breadth of marble that the rope didn't cover. He didn't touch the rope. He didn't have to. The step said everything. Cole gave him the next line, the one you give when a thing stops being hypothetical. Sir, back behind the barrier. Which piece is the barrier? Moreno asked, eyes bright. The actual rope or the air your eyes are drawing. A single drop of rain landed on the back of his hand and broke into 3. He looked down as if surprised that weather applies to everyone. When he looked up again, the smile was gone. Something keener sat in its place, the look a man gets when he decides to finish something he shouldn't have started. He lifted his right hand and pointed not at the rope, not at the sign, but at the M14 laid neat across Cole's front. His finger hung there in the space between gesture and touch. Maya felt the pull in her wrist that twitch where instinct asks for a closer shot. She kept her distance and let the audio take it. Whined through oak leaves, someone's bracelet clicking as they folded their arms. The quiet under 100 throats holding breath. Hey, Moreno said softer now. That thing loaded with anything but tradition. Cole didn't blink. Do not touch the weapon. Moreno smiled again, the flash of a coin as it flips. He didn't touch. He let his knuckles pass an inch from the sling, a phantom brush that made a few people near him step back as if they'd felt it. He rocked on his heels, light for a big man. He threw a pair of half feints at the air, one shoulder twitch like a jab, one knee bent like a low kick. Someone forgot to finish. Soundless theater. His eyes never left the white gloves. A mother gathered the handles of her stroller and turned the whole rig sideways to make a short wall between her toddler and the rope. The kid looked up at her, read the angle of her jaw, and went quiet. Walt shifted forward until the cane's tip hung over the seam between two stones. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Moreno rolled his shoulders once more and let his weight drift toward the line just enough to wake the rope and set it tapping again. He dropped his voice until only the front row could hear him. "Come on, soldier. Give me a yes or no. You're a man, right? Not just a walk cycle." Cole let the rope tap and settle. He made his turn on time, nothing stolen, nothing added. And when he faced the crowd again, his feet came square and his words carried clean. "Final warning. Step back behind the barrier." The wind kicked, then dropped. A paper program skittered, hit a shoe, and stayed. Somewhere behind the amphitheater, a radio crackled and said nothing distinct. Moreno huffed through his nose like he'd been asked to wait in a line he couldn't cut. He tipped his head at the teenagers with the phones as if to take attendance. He set his right foot a hair deeper enough that the rope lifted out of its cradle and hissed against the brass. He drew his hand up to chest height, fingers spread, hovering in that dare of a space where a touch isn't a touch until it is. Maya slid her thumb down a notch on the gain and steadied the recorder with her other hand. She wasn't breathing shallow, but it felt like it. The mic caught the rope's friction, small and dry. It caught the flag's whip and rest. It caught the silence on the other side of a word. The sky leaned closer. The plaza held. Cole's posture didn't move. The rope drew a clean line between what belonged to memory and what didn't, and the line trembled under the weight of a single man's need. The crowd tucked itself into the weather of the moment. Cole set his heel turned on the mark and kept the rhythm that belonged to the place. The next step waited where it always waited, exactly where his boot would find it. The wind came through in a clean stripe and made the rope hum again. Moreno's fingers hovered spread, then closed the last inch as if gravity had taken the choice. His hand found fabric and bone. He caught Cole just below the cuff meat of the thumb, riding the tendon, a grip meant to yank a body off its rails. Cole's voice landed first. "Release." Moreno didn't. He planted and pulled hips, turning like he'd done this in a dozen parking lots. He went for shock and angle, the quick rip that puts a man off balance and turns him into a thing you can move. The marble under his boots wasn't the floor he knew. It had no give. When he shifted, the stone told him exactly how far. Cole didn't wrench back. He let the grab settle into his arm like a weight you can count, then took a small step the way a door takes a hinge. His left hand, white glove fingers flat, rolled over Moreno's knuckles and set the wrist palm up, not fast, just absolute. A half turn through a tight corridor. Elbow closed, shoulders quiet. The move didn't look like anything until it finished. The rope made a dry sound against the brass as it bounced. Someone in the crowd breathed too loud and cut it off. Maya's recorder picked the breath and the rope both. Her thumb pressed the side of the recorder hard enough to leave a crescent. "Let go," Cole said again. Moreno's jaw went hard. He doubled down with the other hand and tried to clamp both around the forearm now. He put his back into it and felt his feet lose the clean purchase he expected. Cole stepped again, not away, but past, planting his heel on a seam he'd felt 100 times. He drew the rifle tight with his right forearm, stock, seated muzzle kept safe, and still the sling a quiet tension across his shoulder. He didn't free his hands for a fight. He used the hand he had. The turn tightened. Moreno's wrist said no, and then said what any wrist says when you line bone to joint and lean: yes. Not a snap, not even a pop, just a sudden truth. His knees told him about the marble. His weight had nowhere useful to go. "Stop," Cole said. Moreno tried to go forward and found forward had been moved. The palm-up twist rolled through to his elbow and set his shoulder talking. He made a noise in his throat he hadn't planned, small and angry. He tried to bull through the pressure with mass, which made the pressure smarter. Cole slid his back foot, put his hip where Moreno's balance wanted to be, and added a low shelf of a leg for a pivot that didn't look like a sweep until the big man's knee asked for mercy. Gravity took its vote. Moreno dropped to one knee. The sound of it was clean and ugly at the same time, a block set hard on a porch. His free hand went out to arrest the fall and slapped stone. Rain polished the print before he lifted it. The plaza let out a breath it had been holding and didn't notice it had. The flag cracked once and then rattled in the lull. Someone's program drifted and plastered itself to a stanchion. Cole didn't ride the drop. He let the angle take the strain out of Moreno's joints and then shifted to keep the lever without burning it. His left hand pinned the wrist with the calm of a man settling a toolbox in a truck bed. His knee touched down for an instant, not on the neck, not even on the shoulder, but near the triceps, just enough to keep the geometry honest. He kept the rifle where it belonged, close and quiet muzzle, a line that didn't cut anyone. The white glove smoothed into the tuck between bone and tendon and stayed. "Breathe," he said level. Moreno huffed through grit. He tried a twist, then a jerk, then the kind of yank that had rescued him in other rooms. Each change made the lever new. The wrist bent just to the edge. The elbow anchored itself against its own refusal. His breath got loud and then shallow. "Hands where I can see them," Cole said to the man who only had one free anyway. "Palms open." Moreno showed the hand that wasn't pinned as if he were presenting evidence. He held it up, and then had to put it down again, because the marble was unforgiving, and balance is a sour deal when one knee is owning all the weight. He spread his fingers on the stone and looked up, eyes bright with something that wasn't all anger. Rain stippled his cheek and cut paths through the dust. Maya didn't move closer. She stayed just behind her own line and let the mic pull the moment in. The sound of Moreno's breath turned into audio you could draw. She drew it in her head as a sine wave with clipped tops. A teacher's keys tapped against her belt and then fell still when she caught them with the other hand. Walt gave the cane one small tap and let it hang. He watched the angle of Cole's spine and the way the white glove didn't shake. He watched the choke on the rope stop its shiver. Keeping your center low, he knew that song. Moreno grunted less sharp now. "Okay," he said, a word that didn't concede anything but had air in it. "Okay." "Stay still," Cole said. A teenager near the steps put his phone down without remembering to stop recording and stared. The video caught his shoes for 10 seconds and the edge of the rope for 10 more. The storm pushed a little harder and then lost interest. The 3 drops turned into 6, and then into the light scatter you get before a decision. The smell of wet stone rose mineral and clean. Moreno tried a different tactic humor, the short, mean kind that has cut a lot of knots for him. "You gonna break it," he said through his teeth. "No," Cole said. "Don't make me." The words weren't a threat, not the way he said them. They were measurements. Maya marked that not in a script, just in her chest. The recorder hummed in her palm. Cole looked like stillness, but the stillness was the busy kind. He skimmed the crowd without letting his eyes wander. He tracked the position of the rope, the angle of the nearest stroller, the placement of Walt's cane, the hum of a cart. He felt the rifle's sling with the back of his shoulder like a level board checks a door frame. He kept Moreno's wrist, as if it were a knob he was not going to over-torque. The line between firmness and damage is thin when everyone's adrenaline is loud. He stayed exactly on it. "Ease your shoulder," he told Moreno, and the big man eased nothing for a second, then eased a fraction. The pain stepped back from the edge it had been looking at. The fraction mattered. A boy somewhere behind Maya whispered, "Is he okay?" No one answered out loud. The boy's father put a hand on his head and left it there a steady weight. Moreno's free hand curled and uncurled on the stone. The fight in him had a rhythm. It rose and fell like a tide. You could see the cycle if you watched the muscles in his forearm flex, burn, give curse. Sweat made small maps along the ridge of his brow. Rain beat at his hairline and ran into his eyes. He blinked it away angrily, and then the blink stung anyway. "Look at me," Cole said, not to command attention, but because people listen with their eyes and he needed the man to hear the next sentence. Moreno looked. "We're done pulling," Cole said. "Not if you understand." It wasn't a bargain. It wasn't theater. It was a check of systems. Moreno held long enough to keep control of something, anything, and then nodded once. "Good," Cole said. He shifted his knee off the triceps and replaced it with the line of his shin lighter pressure, same geometry. He moved the pinned wrist half an inch and bought himself a ladder of options if the man bucked. He never had both hands off the lever. He never let the rifle hang. The whole thing looked like a human version of tying down a tarp before a storm, flat, neat, all corners squared. Maya heard her own breath in the headphones and eased it out through her nose. The recorder caught a tiny catch and made it honest. She whispered a note she could delete later if it sounded like commentary, minimal force, stillness, compliance cue. The rope found its still point. The crowd discovered that hands didn't need to hold phones to be useful. Some went to pockets and stayed, some clasped, some rode stroller handles that didn't move. Moreno swallowed. He tried a roll of the shoulder that would have worked if the man on top of the lever had been show muscle. It failed because the lever wasn't hungry. It was patient. He settled an inch. A drop hit the back of Cole's glove and spread darker. He felt the cool and ignored it. He felt Moreno's pulse in the soft of the wrist and marked its speed the way you mark a tempo before you start a song. Faster than the wind, slower than panic. The measurement mattered too. "Hands visible," he said again, not to add volume, just to keep the shape right. Moreno's free hand stayed on the stone fingers splayed like a starfish. The knuckles were pale where scars crossed them. He flexed once and stopped when the flex made the lever whisper. Walt shifted his weight back a half inch and let his shoulders drop. The cane hovered. He took in the set of Cole's jaw and the way the man's eyes didn't harden or soften. Just eyes doing a job without the extras men add when someone is watching. A gust kicked the banner on the colonnade and ran itself out. A portable radio popped somewhere behind the amphitheater voice on syllables soft. Nothing pushed into the air. A woman near the back took one quiet step to the side so an older gentleman could see. She didn't look down to place her foot. She just knew the stone would be where it ought to be. Order in a place like this invites your limbs to act like they've been taught. Moreno huffed again. The sound had less edge. He looked up at the sky as if the weather had joined the argument against him. It wasn't the weather's fault, and he knew it, and the knowing sharpened something that had been dull all day. His breath slowed. The buzz in his head backed up a degree. Cole kept the lever and gave the man a single inch more room to be human inside it. Men make worse decisions when pain takes the whole room. The inch wasn't mercy, it was math. "Stay with me," he said, and that was as much talking as the moment allowed. Maya watched the shapes. Not the faces, the shapes of how people held themselves when things went tight and then eased. She watched the girl with the paper flag lower it to her knees and put both hands on the stick as if it were a broom waiting to sweep. She watched the teacher's wrist stop shaking when the keys were still. She watched her own reflection in the edge of a polished stone and was surprised at how steady her mouth looked. Moreno unclenched his jaw and then clenched it again as the lever reminded him it was not done being a lever. He tasted copper and decided it was the old cut inside his cheek and not blood new to the problem. He closed his eyes for one count and opened them, and the world was exactly where he'd left it. "Don't move," Cole said. "You're okay." It landed. The words didn't pretend anything. The big man could work with that. He stopped trying to spend his strength on motions that bought him nothing. He let his palm flatten. He didn't nod, but he would have if his neck had offered it. The plaza read the new shape and adjusted. A stroller wheel turned a notch and stopped. The teenagers remembered their phones and locked them without looking. A grounds cart far down the terrace eased to idle. Rain decided light steady, the kind that darkens the stone without flooding it. The marble took it with grace. The flag found a way to snap and hang at once. Cole checked the rifle again without moving his eyes. Feel, not sight. He kept his shoulders low and square, and let his breathing bring everything else down with it. He had the thing he needed a body contained without venom. The line stayed a line. The rope made no more music. Maya kept her distance and kept the audio honest. Walt's cane came down once like a period on a line that had run long. Moreno's breath settled into something you could count on a hand. Water printed his shirt in darker shapes that spread and met. His free hand loosened from the marble in stages, not to lift, but to stop making a fist it didn't know it had made. Cole's glove looked almost gray in the rain. The grip didn't change. He angled his body to shed the water off the stock and away from the man under his hand. He watched the horizon point the way a sailor does when the deck refuses to call itself steady. He didn't search the crowd. He didn't perform. He held the geometry that kept a large man from turning a sacred place into a scene, and he held it with the economy of someone who had rehearsed fewer moves and made them count. The rope shivered once in a new gust and went still. The plaza found its old temperature bit by bit like a room that had been aired out and then closed, not perfect but itself again. A girl's paper flag sagged under the rain and she didn't mind. The boy with the father under the hand on his head watched the white glove and learned nothing he could say out loud. The teacher looked at the sky and then at her students and back at the sky, because that's how you know how loud to make your next instruction. Moreno swallowed, found his voice, and kept it small. "I'm done," he said. It wasn't a surrender, not the way men like him think of that word. It was a fact. "Stay still," Cole said. Same tone, same weight. He kept the lever honest and the space clean. Rain ticked on stone and sleeve. The banner breathed and held. The marble under every shoe kept being marble. The line did its work, and so did the man. The radio that had been murmuring behind the amphitheater came into focus, 2 clipped syllables. A call sign, then the crisp answer that means boots are already moving. The rain made a fine scratch on the marble, now steady enough to paint darker maps around the stanchion bases. Cole held the lever, and the space the white glove steady where bone met tendon. "Don't move," he told Moreno, same tone. "I'm not," Moreno said. His voice had sand in it. He kept his free hand wide on the stone and blinked rain off his lashes. The big energy that had carried him to the rope had run itself out. What was left was weight. 3 figures came in from the right fast without looking like it belt squared jackets slicked with rain caps low. The lead was a woman with forearms corded from work hair cut close under her cap badge, dull in the weather. She took the last 5 yards at a walk, eyes on the geometry in front of her, not the crowd. The other 2 took angles automatically, one off the shoulder line, one back toward the cart path. "Arlington Security," the woman said, voice built to carry and stay level. "Hands visible, hands visible." Cole echoed for the man in his hold, not because the man needed a translator, but because the world does better when the same words hang in it twice. Moreno lifted his free hand. Again fingers spread palm wet. He didn't try to look around the glove that had him. He kept his eyes where they were. The woman Lieutenant Ana Rivera on the name strip met Cole's gaze at the precise moment it was safe for him to look up. "You good?" she asked. Not a softness, just a check. "Affirmative," Cole said. "One subject wrist control responsive, no visible injury." "Any weapons seen?" Rivera asked. "None," Cole said. "Copy." Rivera glanced at the pinned arm, the rifle's position, the set of Cole's hips. She didn't put a hand on anything yet. "Sir," she said to Moreno, same volume, "I'm going to cuff you. Stay still." Moreno blew air through his nose, then through his mouth. "Okay." "Left hand behind your back," Rivera said, already moving. "To her partner cuffs." The second security officer's hand was there with stainless steel that looked heavier than it was. Rivera took the cuff without looking and slid it home on the free wrist with a sound that barely rose over the rain. She tested the fit a quarter turn back off the bite, then nodded to Cole. "On my count, I'll take the right. You peel off." Cole adjusted pressure just enough to give her the window. "Ready." Rivera slid her hand into the angle Cole had kept. 3, 2, 1. On one, Cole rolled the lever out and Rivera rotated in the kind of exchange that looked rehearsed because it is across 1,000 jobs. The second cuff kissed steel and locked. The chain hung a neat U between the wrists. Cole's hand left Moreno's wrist and found the rifle which had never needed finding. The white glove smoothed back to the guard's seam of quiet purpose. He took one back step to clear the space and let the security officers be the only story in it. "Stand," Rivera said. Her partner shifted to give Moreno a knee he could use without help that would look like a shove on someone's phone. Moreno got his feet under him and rose. The kneecap that had banged marble complained. He rolled his shoulders once like a man testing if the old knot had held. "You're being detained," Rivera said. "You're on federal property. Offenses include trespass past a marked barrier and disorderly conduct. Do you understand?" "Yeah," Moreno said. He kept his eyes down and then up and then down again as if none of the directions made a better case for him. "I get it. Any injuries?" Rivera asked. "My knee'll sing later," Moreno muttered. "Wrist's fine." Rivera checked anyway, eyes on skin tone around the cuff on the line the glove had pressed. "We'll have you looked at," she said to her partner. "Log it." The partner nodded and spoke into a mic at his collar, quiet, reporting what the rain already knew. Cole pivoted 2 inches, clearing the rope line with his shoulder so his silhouette wasn't an obstacle between security and the path out. He did a quick check of his uniform like a mechanic settles a tool back into its tray hat brim, level blouse, seam-straight sling, lying flat and not twisted. The move didn't telegraph anything. It just put things where they belong. Maya hadn't moved through any of it. She let the recorder run and then, when the cuffs clicked, brought the camera up and framed a wide shot that took in rope rain security stanchions and as little face as she could while telling the truth of the scene. She rolled the focus across the line of the rope for 2 seconds, black catenary water beads trembling, then let the focal plane find the broader shape. She said nothing. The mic said enough rain on canvas radio, half words, a kid's shoe squeak as he shifted his weight, and then froze again. Walt levered himself fully upright, cane planted to give the security team a clean lane. He stepped back 2 half steps to make a pocket of space that would keep elbows from bumping strangers. He didn't nod at anyone. He didn't need to. Rivera glanced at Cole a last time. "We'll move him on the cart path. You can reset." "Copy," Cole said. He didn't watch them go because he had other coordinates. He let the margin between duty and spectatorship stay clean. Rivera guided Moreno with a hand on the chain between the cuffs. No push, no drag, just direction. "We walk," she said. Her partner floated a half step off Moreno's shoulder, the third officer trailing to keep the lane clear, and the curious kind of distance that makes crowds lean from becoming a wall. They took the shallow ramp, not the stair, because slick stone is democracy. As they passed the teacher's cluster, one boy breathed, "He's in trouble." And the teacher made the universal hush with 2 fingers that means not everything needs a label said out loud. The boy received it and watched his shoes. The grounds cart came off idle and rolled to meet them, electric hum barely above the rain. Rivera didn't rush. She let the pace be human and steady, the kind that lets muscles remember how to listen. The partner opened the back gate of the cart and folded down the wet bench. Moreno sat when asked. Rivera checked the cuffs again, thumb under chain and instrument light in her hands. Satisfied, she tapped the cart's side twice with 2 knuckles. The driver nodded and eased forward tires, whispering on stone. Maya tracked the movement until the cart reached the curve of the colonnade and then let the lens down. She thumbed the recorder to drop a marker she could find later without scrubbing. She wiped a clean line across the glass with the corner of her shirt and put both devices back at rest without turning either off. The rain made a new sound when it found the brim of her cap, small ticks that sounded like a clock agreeing to keep time. The crowd expanded into the space left by motion, then thought better of it, then flowed back to where it had been. A father lifted his hand off his son's head. The son lifted his chin a notch and took a breath that didn't rattle. A girl with a paper flag smoothed it over her knee and watched the color deepen as the paper drank water. Cole stepped into his next measure. He set the rifle exactly where it belonged and let his heels find their squares. The rope line, which had been jostled into a high loop, settled back into its old sag and looked like it had never had any other shape. Cole's hat brim made a neat visor against the rain. A single drop had found the corner of his jaw. It ran along the edge and into the collar unseen. The portable speaker that had tested taps earlier hissed, then went silent when a hand somewhere smart to the moment clicked it off. The banners on the colonnade popped once at their grommets and then smoothed. The stone darkened to the color it gets right before a sun tries for a late appearance and then gives up for the day. The flag found a rhythm that matched none of the human ones, and all of them. Walt eased back onto the bench and set the cane where it wouldn't roll. His hands folded themselves the way old hands do when there are no tools in them. He tracked the guard's cadence for 5 paces and then let his gaze go soft. Maya took one last sweep of the scene stage left to stage right and logged what she would need later: number of officers, route taken, weather conditions, crowd density at handoff. She didn't say it out loud. The work lived fine inside her head until the time came to spill it into a script or a timeline. A man in a blazer near the back stepped out far enough to read the laminated sign, and then stepped back in as if reading it made him a better part of the room that contained it. A stroller wheel clicked the joint in the stone again and rolled quieter after the mother adjusted the angle. Cole's next halt landed clean. He drew the rifle across his chest, the white glove a calm line against the stock. He pressed the heel of his boot to the mark and made the turn that belongs to this place, and not to any one man. The rain took its place in the scene. It had earned it. The crowd matched their breathing to the weather the way people do when they don't remember that they're animals. Rivera's cart, now out of sight, made its last electric hum behind the colonnade. The radio that had been bright in the first minute went back to being background the way service does when it has done what it came to do. The rope didn't so much as wiggle. The plaza kept its shape. Cole paced, clicked, turned. The rhythm was whole again, not because nothing had happened, but because what had been given its proper size and put in the right place. The white gloves stayed white in the rain. The marble under them didn't care about anything but weight and time. The air had the smell of wet stone and canvas and a little brass. The crowd stood where the crowd stood. The line held. The watch went on. The rain steadied into a thin veil that gave everything edges. Lamps along the path blinked to life, one by one, small halos pushed wide by the wet. The banners on the colonnade breathed in place. A hush traveled without directions, not deeper, just clearer, like a room after somebody has set the chairs back where they go. Cole's cadence stitched the plaza together, heel set, turn, present. Each beat placed where other boots had placed it, and where his would keep placing it. The rifle lay true along his front sling snug stock, flat to the coat. Water ghosted off the brim of his hat and trimmed a straight line down the side seam. The rope line sagged in its old arc, black against stone, polished darker by weather. Maya capped the recorder with a thumb not to stop, but to mark. She took 2 slow steps left for a wider field and lifted the camera just enough to clear the shoulder of the man in front of her. No push, no hurry. A shallow, even pan rope stanchion, rain-beaded marble, the guard's measured crossbody carry the flag trading between snap and rest. The mic took the small world in drip on canvas tires, far off a single cough folded under the sound of water. The teacher drew her cluster of kids 2 paces back with a soft sweep of the hand. They came cleanly, the way a class that's learned how to move comes cleanly, and lined themselves along the joint in the stone like they'd been told where to stand. One girl worked the paper flag down the stick so the wet weight wouldn't tear it, then held it flat against her thigh and watched her breath make the paper lift and settle. Walt leaned forward on his cane and then decided better of it and leaned back, letting the wood rest against his knee hand hooded over the curve of the handle. His cap brim took the rain and shrugged it off. He followed the guard's turn to the edge of the mat and let his eyes ease when the rifle came across and settled. His shoulders matched the small exhale that lived in the silence between present and pace. A grounds crewman parked the cart beside the colonnade and killed the motor hand lingering on the switch like you do when you want to be sure a thing is off and will stay that way. The cooling motor ticked twice and went quiet. Cole made the far turn heel, kissing the square the way a bow knows its string. He set the next pace like the rain had asked for it. The stone took each step with the same answer. His jaw held neutral eyes, leveled past the line of faces to the distance that doesn't change with weather or crowds. The coat darkened at the seams, threw off a fine sheen in the lamplight. A toddler asked for up with both hands and got it. From her father's shoulder, she saw the rope from above and made a small circle in the air with her finger, as if noting how it hung. Her father's palm on her shin kept her ankle from swinging. They both watched the guard complete a 21 and turn. Maya rolled a last 5 seconds of room tone, the kind that is less tone than the sound a place makes when it's being itself. She dropped a slate in a whisper into the recorder date weather location and slipped the camera down against her sternum to feel the pull of the strap again. Her shoulders settled. She tucked the recorder into the side pocket and left the cap on red light, steady as a heartbeat. A paper program softened by rain lifted from the base of a stanchion and skated a hand's width before sinking again. A man in a blazer stooped, palmed it, and set it on the bench to soak without sticking. He smoothed the corner once and left it. Cole's next halt came and went without calling attention to itself. The sequence felt like it always feels when it's right built, not performed. He turned on the marked shoulders, square wrists, exact barrel angle unchanged by wind or water. If the rain had weight, it put it somewhere else. If the crowd had a center, it lived along the rope and stayed behind it. The lamplight caught a runnel on the face of the marble and laid a thin brightness down like a line drawn with a steady hand. The flag, soaked and stubborn, found a way to lift anyway. The plaza kept its shape. Cole held his watch. The rain tapped time and did not hurry it. The evening settled without a speech, and the stone kept what it was given. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.